It's time to talk about bullets, folks, and this is a big topic. In fact, it's too large of a topic for just a single video. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start by giving you some of the bare necessities about bullets, and then I'm going to jump a little bit into the realm of extreme. But if you're ready, fasten your seatbelts, get comfortable, and enjoy the ride. This edition of Extreme Reloading Bullets. Now, in the previous episode of Extreme Reloading, we added powder to our 5.56 cases and our 9mm Luger cases. Now, the best thing to do at this point is, without too much waste, we want to go ahead and seal up that case so the powder doesn't spill out all over the place. No better way to do that than to put a bullet into it, and really that case or that cartridge is now ready to fire. In this video, I'm not going to talk too much about 9mm bullets or handgun bullets, apart from what I have just said, and I'm also not going to talk too much about 5.56 bullets. Instead, I'm going to focus on 308 bullets, 308 Winchester bullets in particular, like this Sierra tipped Match King 168 grain bullet. Speaking of 168 grain bullets, I've got a pretty nice selection. Every one of these right here is a 168 grain bullet for the 308 Winchester, or really any 308 caliber cartridge. But all these 168 grain bullets are not identical and really not truly interchangeable. So when you have finally chosen a particular bullet weight or weight class, it's really going to be important to work up that powder charge for that particular bullet. That'll be for that particular type of primer, that particular case and its case capacity, or that particular powder that you're using, and that particular 168 grain bullet. But what 168 grain bullet do you really choose? What should you choose, assuming you've kind of narrowed it down to that weight range or weight class? Well, the answer to that question really depends upon the purpose or the application for this load. If that purpose is hunting or terminal performance type of issues, well, something like this Spear Gold Dot might do really well for you. Or something perhaps something like this Berger Classic Hunter. I don't know if I would actually recommend this, though. We did a test of this bullet in ballistic gelatin and it fragmented really badly. More about that later, maybe in an upcoming video. But if that is not your application, might be looking at loading for some blasting, a little bit of fun at the range, making some range ammo. Well, that's another entirely different application, and probably in that case, the cost of that bullet and its availability will play a big role in your selection. The other application, a very common application, especially for this weight range or weight class 168 grains, is for precision target, and even some fairly long-range precision target use. 168, kind of an oddball if you think about it. We oftentimes see 150, 160, 170, 180, all this different stuff like this, but then we get this 168. That's a really, really good weight for the 308 Winchester. And there's been a lot of matches won with that particular bullet, especially the Sierra Match King bullet in 168 grain. So most of these bullets here I purchased because of my pursuit toward very high precision ammunition, looking for very small groups at longer ranges. Now, I should also say that the 308 Winchester is not the greatest for really, really long ranges, but out to even 700 yards, pretty good pretty good choice. Not too bad on recoil, not too bad on expense. Powder charges are pretty reasonable, and so on and so forth. Anyway, I'm diverging just a little bit. But these bullets here really are, or were purchased in the pursuit of precision. With this particular application in mind, one of the things that I'm going to look at first, or one of the first considerations as I'm just shopping more or less online or looking at some catalogs, bullet catalogs, is the ballistic coefficient, BC. And then the second consideration is, of course, a bullet that performs well in my Ruger precision rifle. Now, what in the world do I really mean by performs well? Well, what I'm talking about there is a bullet that shoots very precise groups at whatever range I'm interested in. Oftentimes I'll be testing my loads at 100 and 200 yards. Beyond that, we start seeing, in my estimation and my experience, we start seeing too much user error creep in, and we are no longer just seeing how well that bullet or that load is grouping, but we're seeing that plus the error effect induced by the shooter themselves. By the way, once you think you have found the bullet for your rifle, or maybe you found two bullets that look really promising for your rifle, shoot it for group with a large group. A while back we did a couple of 30-shot groups, and that was really, really useful for me to do that, and I recommend that to you. Others have talked about a 100-shot group, those sort of things that I think we can get to the same, arrive at the same answer with a 30-shot group. And I'll put the link to those videos in the description below. You can check those out if you're interested. So, when I'm shopping for bullets, like I said, I'll start by looking at the ballistic coefficient. This is the Sierra tipped Match King, and this one gives me a ballistic coefficient of 0.535. This Hornady ELD match gives me a ballistic coefficient of 523. Berger Hybrid Target, 515. Berger Classic Hunter, 489. Speer Gold Dot, 572. Speer Target Match, 534. Nosler AccuBond Long Range, 525. And Nosler Custom Competition, 462. Now, all those numbers that I gave you, those are all stated in G1 ballistic coefficient. Very old method of estimating or approximating the aerodynamic qualities of a given projectile. It's old and probably arguably antiquated, obsolete at this point. It was truly based on non-Spitzer bullets. What's a Spitzer bullet? A Spitzer bullet is a pointed bullet, something that resembles a rocket, the tip of a rocket, the tip of a missile, tip of our common modern bullets today. But the G1 ballistic coefficient, again, was based on non-Spitzer bullets, and in those days, the far more common round nose types of bullets. A better ballistic coefficient is called the G7 ballistic coefficient, and it is designed and engineered for these types of bullets, Spitzer type bullets. The problem with all of these different bullets that I've just shown you is not all of those give us the G7 ballistic coefficient. Speer, for instance, does not publish a G7 ballistic coefficient. So I have given you a G1 ballistic coefficient, so we have some means to make some comparison between these two, all these different bullets. Now, the one little bit of warning I'll give you is that there's a bit of marketing that goes into posting ballistic coefficients. Manufacturers learned years ago that high ballistic coefficient bullets sell better than a related bullet that has a lower ballistic coefficient. So we've seen in some cases some companies will inflate or sometimes greatly inflate the ballistic coefficient for a given bullet. With that understanding, we can still look at those things. I'll still say that if a G7 is published, you're better off with that. But if not, look at those published G1, but take them all with a little grain of salt. Is BC the only consideration? No, not at all. In fact, BC is just kind of an initial look at these bullets, and that's about all that I do with it, whether it's G1 or G7. The next thing that I like to look at is the actual shape of these bullets. Let's go ahead and dig into these. I'll start with this Sierra tipped Match King. If we look at this from base to tip, I'll look at the length of the boat tail. Now you can clearly see that boat tail design, and you might be wondering, what is it for in the first place? Number one, it makes seating the bullets or starting the seating process of a bullet much easier, and it helps to align the concentricity or improve the concentricity of the bullet as we're reloading it. The second thing that it does is it does overall improve the ballistic coefficient rating for that bullet. But also understand that a longer boat tail or a boat tail that really reduces its size on the tail end there can start experiencing some drag effects right there, right at the end, and it actually, in some cases, can be detrimental to the precision of the bullet. Well, the next thing that I look at is what we'll call the bearing surface of this bullet. How long is that bearing surface? Two places where this plays a role. One is when the bullet is seated in that case. How much bearing surface does the bullet allow the case neck to grip the bullet? And next, how much bearing surface is being impacted by the rifling itself, by the lands in that rifling. We have to have a sufficient amount of bearing surface for this bullet to properly pick up the spin imparted by that rifling. Sometimes we'll see bullets with a cannelure around them. That cannelure is normally used as the point where we will seat the bullet to, and if you're crimping a bullet, you can crimp into that cannelure, of course. Sometimes the cannelures were also used to help hold the jacket mechanically or physically, holding the jacket to the lead core inside, kind of like pinching it in that way. However, a cannelure on a precision rifle bullet is detrimental to the precision. And I've seen some pretty good research done on that, and you can lose about 10% of your precision, or your groups will expand by about 10% in dispersion if there's a cannelure on that bullet, in contrast to the exact same bullet without the cannelure. Kind of not the easiest experiment to do, but some research done some years ago was done exactly like that. And they found, and it was done for the military, and they found that that cannelure will affect the dispersion, and you will lose about 10% of your precision. And then we're going to look at the ogive shape. That is this shape from the end of that bearing surface to the tip of that bullet. And that shape can be sometimes very smooth transition from the bearing surface to the tip. In other cases, it's a very abrupt, almost looks angular in shape. Now, those very smooth shapes, very smooth transition, is called a tangent ogive. And the other, the very angular or abrupt transition, those type of bullets are said to have a secant ogive. Now, there are differences besides saying that's a secant and that's a tangent ogive. There are advantages and disadvantages of each. Number one, the tangent ogive bullet, like we're looking at right here, tends to be not very sensitive or insensitive to bullet jump, the distance that the bullet moves before it impacts the rifling. So these are very forgiving with that, or in regards to bullet jump and bullet overall seating depth. If you have a secant bullet, secant ogive bullet, you most likely are going to have to experiment quite a bit with that seating depth and combined overall length, or probably more importantly, the cartridge base to ogive measurements, in order to get really good precision out of those sorts of bullets. If you don't want to go through that, then don't choose a secant ogive bullet. Stick with a tangent ogive bullet. Now this tip is called the meplat. Now I've gotten so used to saying meplat because that's how it's spelled, that it takes a concerted effort for me to say meplat. But that's how it's actually pronounced. It's a French word, I guess, and the word is meplat. It's the tip of the bullet. This meplat uses a polymer tip, whereas the Berger bullets, this is the hybrid target, has an open tip. OTM, you'll oftentimes see open tip match type bullet. So we have all these different bullets, 168 grain bullets for that same rifle cartridge, and we start looking at these different bullets. Oftentimes you'll see a very good photo of those bullets online, so you can really study all this stuff. Understand that a shorter boat tail will oftentimes give you better accuracy, better precision, really. And overall, the longer bullets will sometimes, based on the twist rate of your rifle, oftentimes or sometimes those longer bullets will not perform very well in a particular rifle. Longer bullets oftentimes normally need a faster twist rate. Don't get so caught up by thinking that heavier bullets need a faster twist rate. It's yes, the heavier bullets, but it needs a faster twist rate because it's longer, and the length of it is really the important part there. So let's take a look at a couple of these bullets and see how these exact same 168 grain bullets differ. On this side over here, we're looking at a couple of 168 grain bullets that have a polymer tip on them. Sierra Hornady, and then the Nosler AccuBond long range. Notice also the very significant difference in the height, particularly of this Nosler long range bullet. I had a lot of high hopes for this one right here, but it did not perform well at all in my Ruger Precision Rifle, which has a 1 in 10 twist rate. I suspect it may not have properly stabilized, or may not have stabilized in that rifle, simply because it is so long. Notice also the really long boat tail on this bullet compared to the Sierra tipped Match King. Now I'm going to come back and talk a lot about the Sierra tipped Match King, because this bullet has done really, really well, done the best in my Ruger Precision Rifle. Now you might be wondering, how in the world can this 168 grain bullet here be so much longer than the same weight, same diameter bullet right there? Or even something shorter like this Speer Gold Dot right here, all 168 grain bullets. Okay, well, the way that works is, number one, it's the thickness of the jacket material, the composition of that jacket material, and how much lead is in that bullet. There can also be air pockets. There can be air pockets that may extend a little bit further into some of these, that is then occupied by that polymer tip that gets inserted near the end of the manufacturing process. But certainly take a look at the length of these boat tails. And again, a lot of rifles shoot very well, perform very well with boat tails, but relatively short boat tails. Sierra tipped Match King. This is the Nosler Custom Competition bullet. And then another one is the Speer Target Match. All three of those bullets actually shot quite well in the Ruger Precision Rifle. In fact, my two 30-shot groups were between the Sierra tipped Match King and the Nosler Custom Competition. This one ended up doing better, Sierra tipped Match King, than the Nosler Custom Competition, which is kind of strange for me. I've reloaded 7mm mag and 338 Win Mag and so many different cartridges over the years, 220 Swift, you name it, right? All this different stuff. And Sierra bullets never really worked out for me. Never really worked out for me until I started loading for the Ruger Precision Rifle in 308 Winchester. Then the Sierra bullets really were unbeatable. It doesn't mean that just because it worked well in my rifle that it's going to work well in your rifle. Now let's look at some of the other differences here. You'll notice a difference in bearing length between these two in particular. Right? You can absolutely see this is a shorter bearing length than what we're seeing on this Hornady. And you should also notice that every one of these bullets has a tangent ogive. Almost a very pronounced tangent ogive on this particular bullet, and in fact, the boat tail itself almost seems to flow into this entire tangent right here. If you kind of look at it, sure, there's still an obvious boat tail right there, but a very, very smooth design on both sides. This Berger bullet right here, this is the Berger Hybrid Target, shows some of those same characteristics, but a much straighter ogive here compared to what we're looking at with the Nosler. Now we can compare this Berger, which is just slightly longer than that Berger bullet. This is the Berger Classic Hunter, and it also has a slightly different shape to that ogive. Again, this being a little bit straighter in contrast to this one. This is the Speer Target Match. Again, it has done pretty well in this 308 Winchester. Has a decent bearing length right there. Actually even shorter than the Sierra Tip Match King. And it might be the balance or the overall composition of this bullet that made it shoot so well in my Ruger Precision Rifle. It has a boat tail, but not terribly long boat tail. It has a good bearing surface, but not a tremendously long bearing surface, but not short either. Now this one here, this is the Speer Gold Dot. I call that the ugly bullet. It has almost no boat tail, just a very, very small boat tail. But this bugger, out to 100 or so yards, outshot the Sierra Tip Match King. But for whatever reason, and I still cannot figure it out, it fell apart at longer ranges. In other words, I mean, its performance, its precision fell apart at longer ranges. For precision rifle loads, I'm going to look closely at the ballistic coefficient, G7, if it's available. I'll study the actual shape of the bullet, understanding that really long bow tails can result in poor or reduced precision. Very long bullets may be harder to stabilize. secant ogive, going to be particular or sensitive to the seating depth and the jump to the lands. And if possible, I'll buy maybe a box of 50 of the bullets. Or, as is more common, I will buy one box of 100. And if the bullet looks promising, then I'll stock up as soon as I can, especially in today's world where it's so hard to get some of these very good bullets. And then the proof is in the pudding, as they say. You gotta load it, work up the load for that bullet, give it a fair shake, go out and shoot groups. Ideally, a large group, a 30-shot group will really tell you what bullet is performing well in your rifle. And then you're gonna know what bullet to kind of stick with at that point forward. In our next episode, we're gonna talk about actually seating bullets, setting up bullet seating dies, seating depth, proper seating depth, and those sorts of related topics. Thanks a bunch for watching, and hope to see you in our next extreme reloading.